So with that, I wanted to turn things over to our speakers and wanted to begin with Dr. Za Wu.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank Sasakawa Foundation for inviting me to speak at this very important meeting to discuss about how United States and Japan can help assist Myanmar's development. This morning we have heard from Admiral Bob and then also from the chairman's presentation about some of the key situations in the country. And then Admiral Bob highlighted two important events to watch, the elections and then the ceasefire agreements. And in fact, I think that this is a kind of a premise the international community has been assessing the changes in the country. I would say that, and then also like to bring attention to the socio-economic conditions in the country, because Myanmar, we often said that the country has been undertaking a series of reforms to overcome what we call the triple transition. The one type of transition is the political transition from the military-dominated system into a more democratic, open political system, and then the more civil war into peace, and to transform also a more state-led economy into a more market-based economy. So in that regard, I'd like to bring your attention by updating some of the economic reforms, which I think is quite critical. And then it's also critical to look at the achievements of the economic reforms, because economic reforms can really help do other processes in terms of democratization, in terms of peace building. And maybe perhaps I might even contend that economic reforms are so crucial that it will also determine the progress of democratization as well as the peace building in the country. So I would like to make my updates with the framework that the country has developed about 3 years ago. It is called the Framework for Economic and Social Reforms, which is a kind of a PRSP type of strategy document that the country has developed in 2012, and then we presented to the donor conference in 2013. And this is where we were able to open our relations with the development partners. And then I must also acknowledge the great role that the government of Japan has played in contributing towards adoption of the FESI, and then also successful negotiation at the Paris Club, which essentially opened Myanmar to be re-engaged with the international financial institutions as well as the many development partners. So this is a little evolution of how the FESI has come about. And then this is three. Currently, we have the FESR, which will look at the short-term reforms that will connect with the 20-year long-term National Comprehensive Development Plan. And then we also set the targets and objectives. Of course, the FESR produced a number of reform initiatives, and we are quite busy with quite a lot of actions, and then that covers the whole government, and all the ministries are engaging in a number of sectoral reforms. And of course, we also experience quite a lot of challenges in implementing reforms, because not just by taking a triple transition, by engaging in political reforms, economic reforms, and then also the peace-building processes, but within the social and economic arena, we have also come across a number of challenges. And then basically, in the last 3 3 years, we have been trying to overcome many of the, what we call the binding constraints. And then as a result of these experiences, in the middle of the reform, the President U Thein Sein initiated the two important guidelines. The one is, in the first instance, he gave us a priority list of areas, what we call the national key result areas, in 2013. And then in 2014, just last year, he also emphasized that what he called the third wave of reforms. Essentially, the third wave is supposed to focus more on, not just on the quick wins and the immediate actions that will give results to the tangible benefits for the population, but also he guided the government that these short-term reforms, the quick wins, must also connect with the long-term transformational activities. So the quick wins are supposed to also build the foundations for a new Myanmar, and then this is where he started to pay a lot of attention to the process issues. So these are a list of processes that he has emphasized. Basically, he instructed the government that in order to achieve the results, it's not just the targets matter, but also how we can get these targets, and that the process, especially the participatory processes, do matter. And then this is how the government is lately integrating a number of participatory processes. So I would like to go quickly over some of these examples. For example, like EITI, the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. This is where Myanmar became the 45th member of the EITI. We are ahead of the United States in getting into the EITI. But within the Southeast Asia, we were the third member of the EITI, and then now we are trying to help even the Laos and Cambodians about the EITI and how the resource governance will matter in a country like ours, which is quite endowed with a number of natural resources. And then also the peace building. Nowadays, we are seeing a lot of resource fuel conflicts, and then perhaps dealing with the resource governance can also contribute to the peace process. And then also the resource extractions are one of these areas that are quite opaque and not transparent, and then also has filled with all kinds of rent-seeking activities. And so by correcting the resource extractions, that we are also helping the democratization processes. And sorry. And then lately we were also paying attention to the delivery of the economic reforms, and then we established the delivery units that is essentially to deal with the multiple ministries who are dealing with competing agenda and try to integrate and coordinate them. And then we have the leadership structures, and then we also have more participatory structures on the right, where we are working very closely with the civil society and then also the private sector to achieve the delivery of the economic reforms to the people. And then in the public sector, we also promote the whole of government approach in the policy making. So this comes down to the the recent emphasis on the sustainability of these reforms. And then now we are not just encouraging more participation, we are also trying to mainstream the participation into a more permanent institutional mechanisms. For example, like we have just signed up the commitment to the Open Government Partnership, which is kind of a the kind of a connection, institutionalization of some of those participatory processes, including the EITI, into a more permanent structures. And then we are also setting up the one-stop services to promote the public service delivery so that the reforms can be people-centered. And then also we are holding the municipal elections at the subnational and the city levels, especially in the Yangon city and the Mandalay City is also going to organize some sort of a municipal elections sometime soon. So these are the area we have tried to ensure that there is institutional mechanisms to maintain the sustainability of the reforms. And then also on the delivery side, we are also setting up what we call the task force to combine a number of deliveries into a more permanent structures where the private sector participation is now being mainstreamed into the policy formulations. And then now the task force, this particular example is the task force on the business and investment promotion, task force headed by the Minister of Commerce, and then also include the several deputy ministers from the various delivery units, and then also the independent institutions like the central bank, and then also the think tanks to help these consultation process much more permanent. So we are holding bi-weekly consultations with the private sector to understand what the private sector has concerns and the needs. And this will be monitored by the international benchmarks like ease of doing business, which the chairman just showed the slide of indicators. I must say that in the particular indicator that you have just seen, the ease of doing business, the Myanmar was provisionally assessed in 2013. At that time, our rank is much closer towards 189. That's like 185 or something. Then we greatly reduced to 178 within a year because it was based on the rapid removal of all the distortions and controls and restrictions on the small and medium-sized enterprises. So essentially it reflects the rapid introduction of the liberalization measures in the economy. Then we were able to achieve quite a rapid drop of the improvement of the ranking. But last year, we were able to ditch only one rank because now we are dealing with the more long-term issues about institutions building. So we don't have the independent institutions that can facilitate the market operations. And this is where our ranks improvement is taking longer in the later years. And this reflects the nature of the transition itself. So these are some of those the priorities that we have recently outlined at the latest third Myanmar Development Cooperation Forum. It's a donor conference to, this is what the government of Myanmar has presented. And this is where we are paying attention more on the center of the government and the key performance of the reforms, and then also the integrated infrastructure development and physical and budget reforms. And I would like to go over quickly on the outcomes. Of course, the indicators already show some of these outcomes, but of course, I would love to have more economic indicators to be analyzed, and then more economic analysis needs to make in order to judge how Myanmar has gone so far in her transition. So we have quite a number of outcomes. And then this is the slide that I would like to take your attention. This is something which two premier institutions from the United States did the survey in 2013 and 14. And there are many similarities. Of course, there's quite a high percentage of population that is still expecting the economy is going to get better. I think that explains quite well why some of those latest experiences with the political mobilizations does not really result in the kind of chaotic situations that we did experience about 30, 40 years ago. So the the people does have high expectations the economy will perform better. And despite the fact that our politics is still very unstable, then this is how I would like to make the case that the economic reforms will be very critical to contribute to the democratizations and the peace-building processes. I'm going to conclude very soon. And of course, I will say that economic reforms did produce results that have a far-reaching implications. The IMF recently categorized our reform as been quite stable, and then our indicators, according to the IMF, has been quite good relatively. And but of course, I would give you a list of the outcomes, the recent outcomes that should characterize the progress of the economic reforms. For example, the macroeconomic stability has been achieved. This is something that IMF did recognize very well. One of the reasons that we did achieve the macroeconomic stability, we have removed all the economic distortions, and the allocative efficiency has improved quite a bit. In the political economy term, we have removed all these privileges for many of these connected firms, and then also some privileged class of people who can gain out of the economy. And then also the resource booms. We are also dealing quite well with the resource booms now that we have already diversified a number of investment partners, and then also embraced the EITI and the resource governance. And that essentially meant that the very problematic resource governance situations has been improved quite a bit, and then now we are moving quite rapidly towards a much better resource governance that will essentially help the Myanmar to be out of the resource cost situations. That is also has far-reaching implications on both democratizations and the peace-building processes. And the mobile phones has become a major success story in the country, not only because we offer a very open and transparent tender to the two large multinational corporations to invest in a green free country with 50 million populations. And that became an instant success. That also helped all the connectivity and better social relations and social capital within the country. Now, everywhere you go, you can see all the mobile operators and agents who are quite eager to sell, and that the people are buying, and that people started to have huge network effects. So that essentially also provided a lot of positive effects on both democratization and peace building. And last not the least, in the trade and investment relations, we have also removed a number of restrictions and controls, and then now the investment law has been revised to make a combined investment law that are in line with the ASEAN standards and then also the international standards. Then essentially we are removing all the renter havens. That is the basis of authoritarian systems in the past. So I would say that these economic reforms by itself make such a significant progress, but essentially contributed significantly to the other important processes such as democratizations and peace building. Lastly, I will update you with the latest reform initiative where the government has just introduced, reintroduced what we call the system of senior public service and the permanent secretaries. We did have a permanent secretary system when we started in independence in 1948. We inherited a lot of the British era administrative practices, and then the permanent secretaries are the bulwark of the civil service, and then they really divide the line between the politics and the the bureaucracy. So now we are reintroducing them. The 66 candidates from the various ministries are being chosen to go through an intensive training program. And then they are going to be at least 20 or 30 of permanent secretaries will be chosen right after the budget law has been passed, and then they will start to lead the changes within various ministries, and then they will, the government expected them to become the reform champions, and then there will be relevant permanent secretary offices to facilitate changes. In terms of the beyond 2015, they are the champions for the reforms that will sustain and continue most of the reforms that the current government has taken. So this is where we are getting attention from the development partners to engage with this group of leadership to maintain the momentum for transformation in the country. Well, of course, we still have a lot of challenges to overcome. We do need to pay attention more on the public sector reforms. Institutional innovations are needed to sustain the better results. And that being a latecomer, we can also do a lot of leapfrogging strategy, especially using the technology. And then also communicating results has been recently identified as one of the weakest areas. And then this is where we can't really counter some of those indicators like end of genocide that come up with the 12 benchmarks. There's no single benchmark to look at how Myanmar has been doing on the economy and other areas. And of course, otherwise, we won't be attracting so much investment, especially from the Western countries, especially from Europe. Of course, the United States is a different case here. This is where we need to work together to overcome some of the final challenges, to make sure, to bring the United States more, to have a permanent cooperation with Myanmar. And last but not the least, capacity building and the human resource gaps are huge. And this is where we are seeking a lot of help from all the development partners to build the capacity. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Zhao. Really appreciate that very good introduction and comprehensive assessment.